I don't even remember what tangent I just started on or how I got to that topic, but yeah, so, oh yes, disassembling. So disassemble all uncommons, mostly, unless you can wear one, and it'd be better than your current armor. Alright, so this is going to tell us how to get new skills, which you need to go back to town for. So, the default key is K. That always pops up. I have no idea why. So we can get Concentrated Fury and Trap Strike. Trap Strike is a Glacial Master skill. Concentrated Fury is a Elemental Bomber skill because it takes the element of your weapon or of your alignment, I guess, and applies it to the Concentrated Fury, which I'll demonstrate in a moment. Well, I won't demonstrate the changing of I won't demonstrate the changing of elements because I won't ever be able to do that, but I will demonstrate the skills that I just got. I also demonstrate a cube skill from my level. Oh, what level is it? 54? I don't actually remember what level my main account is. I haven't played it in a while. Alright, so my new skills. Concentrated Fury and Trap Strike. Pretty basic skills. Trap Strike useful for getting, since you're a melee class with Elemental Bomber. Can you tell it's late? I keep messing up my words. No, not that Mental Bomber, but the Glacial Master. If they're near you, you can Trap Strike them away. It's not useful for, well, it's okay damage, but... Alright, now it looks like we go over here. That's not the case. That's a dead end. They trick you. Something I should probably mention. But I was going to mention it a bit later, but you probably noticed it by now. There's a bar at the bottom of my screen. Actually, there's two. The green one, right down here, is my experience. And this is my fatigue points. This game is unique in that... Oh, probably unique at least. In that... you cannot play for as much as you like. Some people find that is a bad thing, and some people find it as a good thing. I find it to be a good thing. You can't play for as long as you like on the same character. You can play as long as you like on any number of characters, since each character has an individual fatigue bar. The fatigue bar goes down 1 point per fatigue that you spend, and 1 fatigue is 1 dungeon room. So entering this dungeon room was 1 fatigue. If I entered the one on the right where I said that was the wrong way to go, that would have spent a fatigue for very minimum gain. Gain. You want to maximize the dungeons, because dungeons give the most experience. So you want to maximize dungeons per fatigue, not fatigue per dungeon. Eventually, when you get close to the end of your fatigue bar, you will find that you can enter a dungeon for the most part. There are a few extreme circumstances, but for the most part, you can enter any dungeon as long as you have at least 1 fatigue. There are special dungeons which have a set amount of rooms, which you cannot enter unless you have that many or higher fatigue. And there's only one of those dungeons per set of areas, so it's not too bad. So you want to basically enter a dungeon with 1 fatigue remaining, and the best way to do that is to plan 3 dungeons ahead. For example, if you have 30 fatigue and the minimum time to complete a dungeon is 10, you might think you want to go 10, 10, 10. However, that's not the case. You want to go 10 and then a bit more depending on the maximum size. If the maximum size is 5, then you do full. No, you do 10. What would you do in that case? You have 30. Well, basically, I'm not going to do the math, but you would time it so that you end your third dungeon at the point where doing a run or full run of a dungeon will result in you having 1 fatigue. And then you do a full dungeon because you get more experience. The most optimal one would be to get to near the end of your fatigue bar, do a full dungeon, do a rush, like run to the end, full. Assuming that you couldn't do another rush and fit it in there. Rush meaning do the minimum number of rooms, and some rooms have variables to them. Like some have different lengths that you can take to do, but that doesn't really start until later. And for the most part, dungeons are fairly symmetrical or linear, meaning they only have one path. For example, in a future one, the path, if you start, there's 2 spawning spots in this dungeon, and if you start in either one, then it will always be the same distance, regardless of where the boss room spawns, which is, again, a 1 in 2 chance. It's designed so that it has no variables, even though it seems like it does. It's just symmetrical and uniform. And most dungeons are like that. Off the top of my head, I think there's Forgotten Shrine, which is like a level, I don't know, 38, somewhere around that dungeon, which has enough boss spawning parts that it's not exactly linear, and it has a variable amount of dungeon pieces that clarify it as a rush. So it could be like, say, 12 or 11. You just have to get lucky in those circumstances, basically. But for the most part, you can plan to end your third dungeon so that you can do a full or rush, depending on what it calls for, and then have one. Basically, just do enough of the dungeon so that you are actually able to end it at 1 fatigue point. Whatever that may entail doesn't necessarily need to be a rush or a full dungeon. It can be a combination. Like, you do 3 more dungeon rooms than it required so that you can rush it and then end at 1, basically. If you're really tricky, you can do it so you rush it +1, so you get a bit more experience. But a bit more experience probably, probably not. Alright, so we are kind of just going through this. You may have noticed the pattern. And this is fairly consistent for the first few, first 30 levels maybe, where you'll do 3 quests or 3 dungeon runs then next area. 3 dungeon runs in next area. It gets a bit more, but like when you get to 17, you go to the next actual town area, and when you get there, you have to do one area like 5 times, and then another area 5 times, and like they just planned the experience that as soon as you run out of epic quests, which are the yellow ones, which we have only seen, there will be common quests, which I'm not going to do. And there's featured quests, which you can take at any time, and they usually give you some sort of decent reward, like a title, which we will get shortly. Our first featured quest. They just give decent bonuses, usually titles. But the golden quests or epic quests are acceptable anywhere, even in dungeons. Common quests, you have to talk to the person and then accept the quest, and you don't have to go back to them to finish it like you do in some most RPGs. If you've been paying attention, I just clicked the exclamation point. That still remains for common quests. Feature quests are the same as epic quests, only they have different rewards, and they don't add any more to the story. Epic quests are always story related. So if you ever want to learn about the story, just read whatever characters are saying and the descriptions of epic quests. Oh, maybe not the descriptions, because, that's not too descriptive. But yeah, the dialogue is definitely important if you're into that sort of thing. I am usually fairly good for a lore of a game that I like. But I don't know the lore of this game, unfortunately. I know the basics. Like, at the moment, we are in an act called the Great Metastasis, which is a complete overhaul of the game. This game in alpha is completely different from when it was in beta because of the Great Metastasis. It was a complete overhaul of all the dungeons. And the story is interesting too. Like, completely blew up everything. It was interesting. So this quest here just basically allows you to, I don't want to say trial. I don't think trial is the right word. But it allows you to, remember when we were creating the character and it showed you the different things. Well, it shows you this again. It tells you their main stats. It tells you their armor type. It shows you some skills, that sort of thing. So this is the one we're picking. So you can see the sort of moves that they get. Like I said, it does involve melee, but also has some area effect spells.